was plug anatomy, but now it's plug internals. So what is a plug? The definition of a plug is a specification for composable modules between web applications. So we're going to see at first L-word plug. Here is our L-word plug. To create a plug, we have to import the plug connection module. We have to define an init function. The init function is a function that's going to be called before calling the call function that we see on the second function. The call function takes a connection, the option that comes from the init function, and it should return a connection by itself. So what it does, a call function, just transforms a connection and returns a connection. So in this case, we have a connection. We set the content type to text plain, and we set the response to 200, okay, and a string here, which is hello world. And we're going to display the time that we pass as an option to the init function, init function over here. So we're going to pass an option here with the time as a field of the OPTS function, OPTS structure, and we pass it here and we return it as itself. Normally, what you can do some operation and return something else. That's the use of init. But in our case, we're gonna just pass it straight through. It's a bit more complicated than an L word, but you will see later why I'm doing that. Okay, what is a connection? A connection, in fact, is a structure, kind of a complex structure that has a mini field. Where's my cursor? Okay. I'm not going to describe all the fields because there's a lot of them, but most important, you can see that we have, let's say, the method. It's the HTTP method that get passed to the plug, to the web server. We have the ports, we can have query parameters, all kind of stuff like request headers. Also, we're gonna have the response too, like response headers and response body and all that. So how do we serve a plug? We can serve a plug by calling the HTTP function on the plug adapter cowboy module, and we're going to pass the plug itself, which is the L word. It's the name of the module, and we're going to pass it the options that is going to be passed to the init function that we've seen before of the plug. And in this case, we're going to just send the local time to that hash. And it's going to return OK and the PID, which I'm going to ignore. So let's have a look at what, let's run it for fun. So if we run that, I have an error. That's why you should never do live coding. So the reason here is that I think I kind of have something running. Anyway, I'm gonna skip that. I think that's, anyone knows why? Do I have something already running? I don't know. Anyway.
You don't already have something listening on to that call?
Yeah, that's what I thought, but it seems that I don't. But maybe if I kill the term, let me go right, it's presentation example, where's mix, whoops. Anyway, I don't know. Is it, I've tested that and it worked. Anyway, so it's not that important, but when we run that, we're gonna have the browser and we'll see the time with the hello world with the time that is gonna be displayed. You can also run a plug by using a supervisor. So you can define it as a children of the application by doing this, like plug adapter cowboy child spec and HTTP, and it's gonna run your plug. Okay, so we're gonna talk also in this talk about how to use builder. A builder is a way to combine plugs together. Since a plug takes a connection as a parameter and return a connection as a return value, you can plug them together. So in this case, we define a module, which is my builded plug. We use the builder function, and then using the plug macro, we can define multiple plugs that are going to be called one after the other. So let's look at how exactly it works under the cover. So when you call the use plug builder, what in fact underneath it's going to do, it's going to call the compile function. The compile function, what it does, it takes like all the plugs and it's going to generate an abstract syntax tree to be like, the abstract syntax tree is going to be used to build the call function of the builder that you see there. For the builder, for the my builded plug, you're going to get a call function that's going to be built from the compile function here. The compile function, in fact, it takes a list of plug that are in the reverse order that you define it, like here. So the hello world plug here is defined in the list, in the builder, it's defined at the end, but now we see it's defined at the top. I think it's probably because of recursion. I'm not sure, I haven't like looked at the code fully deeply. And also I would say that this part of code is kind of hard on the brain. You need to be pretty good at reading macros and all the magic of Phoenix, of Elixir. So, but anyway, you get the list here, you define the list, the compile function is going to compile like every module one after the other. And the first parameter of every tuple that you see here, the first parameter, the first value is the plug name. The second one is the option that you pass to the init function that you define here. Whoops, I don't see my cursor. Here. And the last one is a guard clause. In our case, like in all the builders that Phoenix or plug uses, it's always true, so you don't care about that. I read the documentation, and I would say that I think even the example is not good, so, and the code is super hard to read, but I think like, think about it, like when you use a builder, it's always true there. And you see in the second one, we have a logger, And if we expand that if we expand the quoted AST, we expand it to a string and we output it, we get something like that. So the call function of the builder is going to be exactly like that. It's going to be compiled like this. So you get a case that will, in fact, you will run the logger at first with the connection. The info here is the default value that is defined in the init function of the logger. So you're gonna get the connection, the logger is gonna return another connection. So after that, you do the compiler compiles it to match, like the result of that, it's gonna give you, it's gonna give you a connection and then you're gonna pattern match on it. If the connection has the altered flag set to true, it's the call function gonna return the connection itself, like just write that. It's gonna stop like everything else. If the altered flag is not set, it's gonna execute the next plug on the stack, on the list. So we're gonna pass the connection, the previous connection that is coming from the logger in this case, and we're gonna pass the time. There's a very important thing to note here is that the time is compiled. So the time will be always the same. So if for some reason in your plug, let's say here, you have other stuff that depends, let's say, on an environment variable, and you compile it on your computer, and it's on the dev environment, it's going to compile using the environment variable that is on your computer. And if you put that on a remote server, on let's say a production server, but you're going to get the value from the environment variable that is on your development computer. So it's very important to notice that the parameter that you pass on the plug here is always resolved at compile time. So here we were at the hello world plug, but after that, since there is no, we check the same thing. We check if it's altered. If it's altered, we return the connection. If it's not, in fact, normally we would, if there would have been some other plug in the list, we would have executed the other plug call function there and so. So it's kind of a chain. So if we look at an example like this one, here what I do, I pass the logger plug at first, the basic auth at second, and also at the last I will put my hello world plug. So what it looks like, it's a bit like that. First we receive the connection from the server, we pass it to the logger call function. The logger call function, the logger will always return a connection, but probably it will not halt it, but anyway we check it. If it's halted, we stop, and if we don't, we continue to the basic auth plug. If the basic auth plug, let's say, in fact what it's doing, it's gonna read the header file for I don't remember which authentication, but I think it's the authentication token or something like that. It's gonna look at the header from the HTTP header, check if the password and the email is okay. If both email and password are right, we're going to return the connection without being halted to the next plug. If not, we're going to halt the chain here. So this is the main reason why they halted in fact, this is how, like, we can stop a chain of plug to execute. So, yes. So that's it. So in the code, normally you wouldn't set like the alt and flag to true. You would use something like that. You would take the connection, pass it to the alt function. The alt function will return the connection with the alt flag set to true. So our responses are sent to the client. Okay, so something that I was kind of surprised, it's a bit different than rack in Ruby, is that when, let's say when you have a chain of function that is called on the connection, if you send the response, if you apply the function, the send response function, what it's gonna do, it's gonna send the response at the call site. So the response is going to be sent there and not after the call function has returned. So this is a really important, it's not that important, but it's nice to know that it's going to be called, the send response is going to be called right at this moment and not after the call function has returned. Because in rack, I don't know if people know about Ruby, but in rack, it's different. It's the last call function will return like the response body, and there is the status code, and it's what the last call will return that is going to be sent to the server. So in this case, it's different. So normally. But now it seems that my demo doesn't work, but I will try. But if I run the server, je pense que c'est 4005, ça marchera pas. Okay. So there's something that is running somewhere. I don't know where. Elixir? Elixir or Lang or something like it's mine. Okay, I know what's happening. Okay, I have a plug that is running. Okay, so if I look my Hello World plug, so yes, in order to demonstrate that, if I do something like that, whoops, connection, I do, let's say timer point sleep, 5 seconds, 4 seconds, I don't care, and I do puts waking up like this, and I return the connection. If I run that, so okay, I can see something. So if I do this, if I refresh, I have the result right away, but like it's waking up after, so it means that we get the response right, whoops, we get the response right at the call site, and then after that it writes the wake up. So that's what I wanted to show. Okay, next. Any questions so far? Yeah.
So when you send, if you have multiple send responses, you get an exception, right?
Sorry, can you
When
repeat?
you send multiple responses, you get an exception.
You mean multiple responses? Yeah, you're gonna get an exception. If you send multiple responses, in fact, it checks. When you send a response, it sets a flag, a status flag on the connection, and after that, when you try to send a response back, it's gonna check that flag. If that flag is set as sent, it's gonna raise an exception. I'm not sure what's exactly the states, but that's the idea. If you send it once and you try to send it twice, you're gonna get an exception. That's a good question. Thank you. Yeah.
Did you find out why they do this way? I mean, why they send response immediately?
I don't know the reason. That's a good question, but I don't know why. But I would say something. Like if you use Phoenix and I don't know how many people, I imagine a lot of people know about Phoenix, but when you do the render, it's not the same thing. It's not gonna send it right away. If you do a render in an action, in a Phoenix action, the send will be done later on. It's not gonna be sent when you call the render function. So it's gonna be done after the action has finished, has completed. So it's kind of subtle difference that you need to know. So, it's okay? So, the plug logger. I wanted to talk a bit about the plug logger because you will see why. The plug logger, in fact, if I change the application here and I use, instead of using the hello world, I'm going to use my builder plug, which is the one that I was talking about. The builder plug, what it does, it goes through the logger, and after that it calls the plug, the hello world plug. So if we run that, we're going to have something like this. Localhost, I can take the other one here. Whoops, stop for 1006, it's 5. Okay, so if I put it aside like that, if I refresh, I get a log that describes what is what verb we're using, what's the path, and how long it took for the action to run. So the big question here is how can we write the time, how can we display how long it took an action if the call function is like if we go back here we get the connection and then the logger calls the calls function and then it ends. So the only way that the only thing that we can measure with the logger would be the time that it's spent inside the logger, inside the call function of the logger. So how can we calculate the time that it takes to execute a request? So the way that they approach that with the plug is, let's go back here. If we look at the code, okay, that's okay. So if we look at the call function of the logger, the first thing that we do, we log the connection method with the request path. That's what we saw just here. Whoops, I don't see my cursor. Just here. So that's the first thing that we do. The second thing is that we start a timer with the system monitoring. That's good. You can read it. And then what we do after that is that we register a callback that will be called just before sending. So it's something that is a bit of a lie. So when they say that it's sent in 200, like in 48 microseconds, it's not true. It's not, it's the time that it takes to generate the response. It's not the time that it takes to send the response. That's the subtlety. So there's a mechanism that you can register, like a plug can register a function that's going to be called, as I said, just before sending. So in our case, we just, like the loggers, just going to log the time difference, and yeah, and that's about it. So this is the way that José Valim, I don't know exactly who did that, but it's his commit. But it's the way that they found to do that kind of stuff, like to time or... yeah, so that's a bit how it works. So if we look at the send response function that we used all over since the beginning of this talk, the first thing is that we run all the before send function, and then we send the response, and then here we send... So this is sending a message to the owner of the connection that the message was that is sent. Anyway, I don't know that much about that. And then we return the connection as is, because the send response takes a connection and returns a connection. So that's about it. So the conclusion. Plugs are very composable, as you can see. Builders, what they do, they compile like every call function together while checking for the alt flag. And yeah, the send response function is sending the information right away, and it's not delayed it's not like rack that sends the response when the call function is completed. And yeah, the register before send function can be used for completing plug execution. So that's it. Okay. Thank you.